Hello, everyone. We are back with Meet Me in the Middle. Yes. My name is Lindsay Pollard, and we have Joy Martin here, and our very special guest, Tiffany Martin from the DandeLion House. And
Two Martins.
yeah, two Martins. How about that?
It's all right, yeah.
Are you all related?
Sisters.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, we're going to jump right in today because we have a lot of great information to
Yeah.
share with you and to discuss. And I mean, we've got some hot topics here. So, the first thing that we're going to talk about is the maternity health care crisis here in Alabama. And with special guest Tiffany Martin, we're going to let you jump in and just kind of introduce yourself a little bit. And then we're going to jump into that subject because of the special gift that you have and the special ministry that you have through the DandeLion House.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Joy, so much for inviting me to take part of this. Again, am Tiffany Martin. I'm originally from Alabama. Believe it or not many people can say that.
That's true.
Right. Yeah. My mom grew up here in the Huntsville area, and my dad grew up in South Alabama in Greenville area. And I went to school at Lee High School and graduated from the University of Memphis and thought I'd never come back. I literally left thinking I will not come back to Alabama. Lo and behold, my husband, who I've been married to for 24 years, and our two children moved back here around 2013, and we've been here since then. And we realized that it was an assignment, and that the Father has just brought us back to Alabama to be a blessing and to help the community in this area. And one of those areas has been the maternity health care crisis. Now, I'm going to be honest and tell you, I've only been fully engaged in this particular area for about 4 years. I had no idea that we had a crisis in this state when it came to maternity health care, particularly women who are pregnant and having babies. And I was astonished when I learned that Alabama is the third highest ranked state for women who are dying at childbirth, and the sixth highest ranked state for infants that are dying at childbirth and not even making it to their first birthday. We have the saddest and poorest birth outcomes in the nation. We have the highest cesarean rates. We have high preterm birth rates. Our teen birth rates are also high, low birth weight, as well as low breastfeeding success. All of those are kind of your metrics for good and healthy maternity health care, right? We're not doing so good in it. And it was kind of a sad reality, and lots of people do not know this. With that said, on top of those statistics, African-American women and women of Hispanic heritage are disproportionately affected. African-American women in particular are 3 times more likely to die during childbirth than Caucasian women. It's just an unfortunate reality. And again, I had no idea. So with that said,
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What are some of the factors that are
Yeah, that was my question exactly. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I'm going to interrupt you right there, right now, because we need to know that, like, yes, why is that? Or do we know why? Or is it just a thing? Talk to us.
Well, there's several factors. There's socioeconomic factors, obviously. We have quite impoverished areas of Alabama, lots of maternity health care deserts, which fewer, less access to quality prenatal care. We have a lot of women, particularly African-American women, that are just single moms. And the stressors of living alone and having to be a single mom is no joke. All of those things affect that pregnancy and that birth experience. But aside from socioeconomic factors, is this unfortunate truth, and statistically so, that these births are happening in hospital settings where lots of unnecessary interventions are being introduced. So a mom can go into a hospital setting, and depending on her provider and the protocols that are in place, she may be offered various interventions prematurely or unnecessarily. And those interventions create what we call the cascade of interventions. So let's just say a mom goes in and they're wanting to induce because for whatever reason, either mom is saying, I'm tired of being pregnant, and she elects for an induction, or the doctor is saying, you really kind of need to be induced for whatever reasons. And they introduce medications like Pitocin, which basically heightens and speeds up contraction patterns at a kind of an abnormal rate to some degree, because your body's naturally made as a woman to make that process gradually come about to bring that baby on here. But if we expedite it, we kind of interrupted and kind of interfered with the biological clock. And that is sometimes the body's way of saying, I don't like this. And once that happens, then the baby's heart rate may change and get really high, or the baby's heart rate could drop. The minute that happens, everyone's concerned. Now we got to do something else to make sure the baby's heart rate's right. So we introduce other medications. And then once we do that, then the mom's body says, I don't like that. And then we have a cascade of interventions. And now we're introducing all the things to try to mitigate the last thing that we did that caused the problem. And without fail, sometimes and more often, that baby may not make it, that mom may not make it. Or if they do, we're still looking at the first year of life where it's a question mark. And that's just sad and is unnecessary. Women have been birthing for like ever. Like, I don't even want to say how many years. Like, we came into the world with the equipment to do this. And I err on the side of many of those that are in the birthing community that natural processes of birth are better. And if we cannot interfere with that and do all the things we can prenatally to prepare that mom and equip that mom, even if she's a single mom, and we deal with those stressors and we deal with some of the issues that she's working through, then there's a likelihood that we can improve that birth outcome and avoid the interventions. So those are just some highlights of things that make those statistics so astonishing and sad.
Yeah, and I wish I'd had you back when I was having babies. I've had 4 C-sections, count them, 4. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, and of course, you know, I'm very short, and so there's things there, but I wish I'd had more support in the process, because I did feel like there was this point where they just, this is not going to work. Let's just scoot you in for a C-section, you know?
Yeah, and I'll tell you that the C-section concept historically, though it definitely is a game changer when it's needed. I want to just go on the record to say there are times where we just got to get that baby. And I applaud the physicians who, by their title and their education, are surgeons. That's what they are. I am not interested in cutting on anybody. Like, that's okay. You guys can do that. But when it's unnecessary, then I think it's just one of those things that we need to revisit. But what I was going to say additional is that many women don't realize that they can attempt a vaginal birth after cesarean, often called a VBAC. And with you having had 4 C-sections, I question if you were ever given the option, or if anyone said you have a choice, you could try and attempt. And there are only a few doctors in this state that feel comfortable overseeing that process. Otherwise, you have to kind of go to other states like Tennessee, where they're not as
across the board.
Across the border.
Yeah. Okay, so what got you? By the way, I did on my own look up those options with baby number 2, and I actually did try a VBAC. I was in labor for 24 hours, pushed for 3. Okay. And then they were like, and I had a midwife, thankfully. Yay. I just still wish there had been more things along the way, and that was something that I initiated just from research and, but you're right. People just don't know what they don't know. And if you're not given the options, but what got you into really focusing on women of minority and even the whole, okay, I don't know if you said this yet, that you're a doula and you're about to finish your midwifery. Yay.
Yay.
So talk about that and what got you into that.
Well, I'm going to share the truth about it. I am not naturally one that would ever have chosen to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I had just finished up a tour as a director of a nonprofit because in my prior life, I was in corporate America. I have a business degree, and I spent a lot of time in upper management. And I was the director of a conservatory for fine arts and music because I'm also a musician. Loved the job, loved the ministry that was in place, but my tour was up. And I literally just began to pray, and I was like, Lord, what's next for me? And this was in like the summer of 2018. And not kidding, I am in the shower and I hear midwife. And I heard it so clearly. I got out the shower and I was like, what's that about? And I sat down beside the bed with towel wrapped and dripping a little bit, like, okay, what is midwife about? Long story as short as I can make it, I just went online and searched midwife and started to like look into what was this about. Ended up calling Bethel College, I think, or Bethel University rather, and talked with someone there. And in talking with her, she told me about their program for nurse midwives. And then after she talked to me a little bit more, she said, but you know, you might want to consider the direct entry route. And I was like, what is that? So without fail, I looked up direct entry, ended up connecting with another young lady who is a pelvic floor therapist who was pregnant. And she did not realize that I was pondering this midwifery journey. And she calls me one day, dear friend, and says, I want you to ride with me to Tennessee. I said, okay. And I said, well, where are we going? She was like, I'm going to see a midwife. I said, no, you're kidding. And so we got in the car and I started explaining all the things about my shower moment and calling people and trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. And she was like, well, you need to talk to my other friend. And so she calls in the car, her friend who's a doula in the Shoals area. Love her to death. Her name is Katie Terry. She's one of the finest doulas in this area. And Katie gets on the phone, as joyful as both of you are, and says, girl, I'm about to have a training. I will sponsor you. I'll give you a scholarship. Come on into my training. So I entered into doula work by way of a phone call from a friend who's a pelvic therapist on our way to see a midwife. And then once we got to the midwife's office, got to meet her and talk with her more. And she just confirmed that being a doula was a great start into the journey of becoming a midwife. And so I got trained, became a doula in 2018, started practicing immediately. Doulas can provide continuous support in a hospital or out of hospital setting. Our role is to provide informational support, physical, emotional support, as well as advocacy support. So that moms are well educated, they know what the decisions they have to make and kind of can go in knowing what to expect and be prepared to last, especially important for first-time moms. And then I got to meet two midwives that were here in the area, and they offered to be my preceptors. I mean, it was like unfolding.
It just flowed.
It just flowed. The doors open. And so in short, I started working with them and continued with doula work at the same time. And then I became a student at the National College of Midwifery on scholarship. And I am in my final year of that program, and I will graduate with an Associate's of Science in Midwifery, at which time I will be able to take what's called the NARM exam and be licensed to specialize in home birth. And so in addition to that, I've been able to launch a doula training program to help others become doulas in the community. I feel like we've got to share knowledge and, you know, lend a hand to others who have interest in making a difference, because I can't do it by myself. We need a whole bunch more people, boots on the ground. And I just find that doula and midwifery care is a huge solution to the big crisis that we're facing in Alabama.
Wow. So my takeaway from that is listen to God in the shower.
He's always speaking. I'm just saying. I don't know if the water helps or what, but I'm just letting
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say.
Shower down. I'm hearing the voice of the Lord. It was
I know. Clear. Some people get a bright light on the road, you know, and you get, listen, that's a sacred place. So there you go. Just don't underestimate where God can speak to you.
He can do it in here.
And that's what he does when he's in it and all over it. It just rolls so smoothly, and the door is open. So,
Yeah.
you're in the shower, you're hearing his word, you're looking it up. Next thing you know, you're talking to somebody, and then you're talking to somebody else, and then just the connection. And that's
Yeah.
just his way. That's
And
his
it changed the trajectory of your life. I mean, you never
Yes.
even dreamed of that. Like it really came out of thin air to you, kind of.
Absolutely. I mean, you're looking at someone that like it took several weeks for me to actually take blood from somebody. Like I was freaked out. Like I don't like needles personally. I don't want to stick anybody with the needle. But
Yeah.
those kinds of things are necessary for some of the testing and work that we do, to help prenatally prepare moms and make sure that they're healthy and safe. And I will say, the Lord is good about giving assignments. I find
Mm.
that in our age, even in my generation, but certainly now, there's still such a focus on get your degree. You need to know what you're going to do next. A lot of pressure on young people to figure things out. But the truth is that I have a degree in business, but I've had so many assignments that
Yeah.
have
Mm.
not necessarily required or relied so much on my degree. It really was the favor of God and my willingness to
Mm.
obey his voice, and to see where the needs were and to be willing to jump in if he needed that. And I feel like if we could approach life a little bit more like that without the
Mhm.
pressure of performing, without the pressure
Mm.
of being professional or pursuing careers and trying to be successful in life, all of that is mumbo jumbo. The truth is, we're talking about making impact in a kingdom way and an eternal way. And that is not done by necessarily degrees, even though those are helpful. I'm obviously getting one. But it really is about being on assignment and being okay to go the road that you didn't think you were going to have to travel, but it's usually the better way.
Wow. Okay. In the time we have left, like I know, so there's so many statistics out there about women and minority and the birthing immortality rate. No, which one?
Mortality. Yeah.
Mortality rate. I always like have to think a minute. It's early the time we're recording. It's early for me. That's why I have my coffee.
That's right. That's right.
But is there some places people can go to look at that? I know you had some statistics up on another screen. Where would you
Sure.
send people to look at those statistics if they were, considering going a similar route and helping women?
Sure. Well, from a statistics standpoint, you can always check out the website at CDC, right? The
Okay.
Center for Disease Control has a lot of the statistics present there. We also have the Alabama Department of Public Health that should have statistics on their websites. If you Google maternity health care crisis in Alabama, you will see everything you want to see. We have a scorecard. You just need to
Wow.
know that pretty much there's a 36% chance of a woman of color ending up with a C-section, 3 times more likely for them to die a preventable pregnancy-related complication during labor, 2 times more likely for an African-American baby to die and not even get to their first birthday, even if they survived labor in birth. Um,
Wow.
Obviously, there's a higher potential for long-term psychological effects of mistreatment in the hospital. There's like this
Mm.
historical data that shows that oftentimes there's this misconception and myth that African American women can handle pain better. And honestly, I think that sometimes in the healthcare profession, when you have a more commercialized approach to healthcare versus a relational approach to care,
Mm.
then you're a number and protocols rule, and you get in and you get out. We do what we do for everyone, and you stick with the program, and that's the way it works. But that doesn't work because the statistics prove that women are not making it out alive in the hospital settings too often. And having a doula and midwife can make a difference there. I'm speaking on behalf of most doulas that I know that are professional. We are not anti-medicine nor anti-hospital or anti-physician. We are anti-abuse. We are
Mm.
anti maternal mortality and morbidity. We don't want to see anyone hurt and harmed unnecessarily. And sometimes you can be desensitized in this field if you're not careful. And I think that more of us as healthcare providers across the board need to take care of our mental health and make sure that we are careful to establish our roots spiritually, because it is a spiritual experience. And I think that it can get lost in the sauce if we're not careful. That we're just kind of doing our job, but we're not caring for people. And that's not okay. It's hurting and it's not helping. If you want to be a midwife or a doula, then I would be glad to help direct folks. We have a program at the DandeLion House, which I'm glad to share later, for those who are aspiring doulas and midwives, to help mentor and guide them on a great path to that. But you can go to the Alabama Midwives Alliance website. They have lots of good information there, as well as our State Board of Midwifery's website. And there are some national organizations that do doula training that you can look into. If you just search doula training, I promise it'll be an insane number that come up. But again, I'm glad to be a local resource for those who need help. And I'll be glad to provide the information at some point. But I do want to mention one final thing. I think that the focus on the maternity health crisis in Alabama often is very social justice focused. And it should be. There is the element of disparity. And honestly, it's just irrefutable. There's no way to get around it. The women who are dying look like me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the truth. And there's no way around it. But I also...
Sorry, go ahead. Continue.
No, please. No, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. Because you're the guest. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, I just, but I also feel like the less often communicated is what I would call the spiritual aspects of things. This is not new. From a biblical standpoint, we have a reference in the Old Testament, particularly during the time between Joseph's reign in Egypt and all the way up through the Exodus, where we have pharaohs of old sending out edicts to kill the babies, right? And this idea of what I would say population control of old and other agendas that are not pro-life per se are really in play, and it's a spiritual matter. And I do believe that from a spiritual standpoint, we need to be mindful of what's really happening in that way. Most women do not know, which is part of what we try to do and educate with their consent, because we never impose our faith or beliefs on others, but we are very willing to provide the revelation that's needed to really maximize your birth. When that baby's in the womb, that baby is now really in touch with the spiritual realm just as much as the earthly. And whatever that mom is experiencing or enduring in the natural, there's a spiritual counter and there's a spiritual influence that's in play. And many in the world of psychology will talk about wounds that can occur in the womb or things that can happen from a spiritual standpoint to the infant while in the womb. For example, a lot of women who are in socioeconomic conditions that are not ideal or and are vulnerable deal with fear. Well, the Father says you have not been given the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and soundness of mind, right? But the spirit of fear is present while this mom is pregnant. So we need to deal with the fear. We need to address the fear factors, and we need to do that not only for that mom, but for that baby, because that baby's experiencing what mom is experiencing. And there is a spiritual presence involved in the area of pregnancy and birth. And I think that it is not often discussed, but it needs to be. And I think that's part of our war too, behind the scenes. It's a spiritual war too.
Wow. Lindsay, what were you going to ask there?
Great. I mean, that I'm kind of marinating on what she was saying, so I'm glad I cut myself off to let you finish. But when you talk about fear, I know that there's a book that I actually own, and it's called Medical Apartheid. And it's by an author by the name of Harriet Washington. And it talks about the historical experiences of African Americans throughout history to current, and all the experimentations that have been done, all of, and what Tiffany was saying is there's this misconception that African Americans have this higher tolerance of pain. So in the book, it talks about how different procedures were done without anesthesia, and just to kind of see the experimentation. And so I think those are some of the factors, like what we talked about, some of the other factors before, of why there's such a high mortality rate that fear factor is so real.
Yes.
It's like this PTSD that we have with the medical community. And so I'm so thankful that we have doulas and we have midwives that can educate, be there, be hands-on support, and that are spiritual women such as yourselves that bring that spiritual aspect of it to console, not to console, but to provide that encouragement, that empowerment that our women need. Because is it true or not? I don't know if this is true. This is what I've just heard my whole life, that is the closest a woman gets to death is when she is giving birth. So I don't know if that's a myth. I don't know how true that is, but I've had 2 children myself. I say it's natural birth, even though I had a ton of drugs because I love them drugs. Okay? So I say it's natural, but other people might object to that. But my daughter had a C-section, an emergency C-section, which I witnessed, and I was in the room for. And then she had a natural birth for her second child. And for the second child, it was amazing because of the way the Lord worked. They went in for a scheduled, natural birth, and they didn't have enough staff, and they were just going to throw somebody in there to birth her baby. And so we were like, halt, no, we're not doing it. And so my daughter and her husband were just livid because they were afraid, but then at the same time, they were livid because it didn't seem like everything was in place for them. So, I had to talk them down on the way home because they were, getting ready to bless some people out. So I said, look, God blocks things for a reason. They weren't prepared for you. Anything is over. And so she gave birth the next day, and the right people were in place. So it was a smooth process. You know what I'm saying? So God goes before us in all these different instances. And I love saying that, how he goes before us. Deuteronomy says that. He goes before us. And so he put people like you in place, Tiffany, and you're among a beautiful set of people and professionals that he uses to go before getting ready to give birth. And what a miracle experience that is to be able to co-labor with the Father to create.
Absolutely.
Beautifully said. Yeah. And we need to wrap up this segment, but I wanted to say, you were talking about the fear, the things that can cause different issues and the fear in minority women. And while like a friend of mine who's in her mid 70s now, her mama in Birmingham, Alabama had, I think, I don't know, 9 children or something like that. She said, and I don't know if all of them, but some of her babies, they put her in the hallway to deliver her babies. This is what my friend said. So this is how she relayed the story to me. So I know that we have come a long way from there, but you wonder why there is still fear in the heart of minority women when they've heard these stories from generations past. And that has only been the generation before us. I mean, there's not been that far back,
No.
And just not giving that woman dignity to take her to a private room, or else maybe she was just going so fast. I don't know. But so, just to say, there may be more clarifiers that I don't know, but still, when someone hears a story like that, then they're going to go into their own birthing experience, even if it's 75 years later. That story stuck.
Yes.
And that fear is going to be there. Like, what are they going to do to me? Are they going to treat me well? And people, say, we're not dealing with that anymore. And like, you can't undo what those stories do internally. The body does keep score. And as you said, the spiritual is at war, because I think the enemy will say, keep throwing those, fears back in. Well, yeah, they're going to do to you what they did to your grandma and your
Right.
great grandma,
That's right.
And so those are the things that I love, that I think you're trying to help undo, give a new narrative for that. And so anyway, we're going to wrap it. Boy, it's hard to stop this one
Yes,
because there's so much.
it
I'm just
is.
telling you, but for all of you listening, some of the links that Tiffany shared, we're going to put in the comments or in the description with our video. So if you didn't get a chance to write that down, I'm going to try to capture all that for us. But stay tuned, because we're going to do another session with Tiffany on another crisis that we're going to call the relationship crisis. So we're going to move from birthing in a way to just general relationships, marriage, as well as other kind of relationships in general, the crisis in relationships. And then we got another one to end it out. There's going to be 3. So this is number 1. So stay tuned, guys. We'll see you next time.